I came home to find a car parked in my garage, and it wasn't mine. No break-in, no theft, just my HOA president helping herself like she owned the place. So I locked the garage, disappeared for 10 days, and what happened next? It flipped. The whole neighborhood upside down. You won't believe how it ends. It was the kind of house I used to picture in my mind during long, stressful days, behind a flickering screen at my IT job. Modest. Sun-washed stucco with a neat little yard, 2-car garage, and the kind of silence you don't get in the city. Just outside Phoenix where the mountains catch fire at sunset, and the air smells like creosote after a summer rain. I'd given 20 years to that job, trading time with family, missed birthdays, holidays spent in server rooms fixing what others broke. But I kept grinding, saving, counting the days until I could finally afford peace of mind. When I signed those closing papers, held the keys in my hand for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Like I'd finally earned a piece of dignity back from all the compromises I'd made along the way. For the first few months, life was exactly how I imagined it would be. The neighbors were friendly enough. Quiet nods at the mailbox, polite, waves during morning walks, and the HOA seemed like just another line item on the bills. I didn't think much of it, until Marlene introduced herself. Now Marlene wasn't a neighbor in the usual sense. She didn't just live on the street. She watched it. Every day, she patrolled the block with a clipboard in hand and a look on her face like everyone was doing something wrong. Late trash cans? You got a warning. Garden hose visible from the curb? Another warning. Mailbox paint chipped? Better fix it or risk a fine. She wore her position as HOA president like a badge of honor and made sure everyone knew who was in charge. People whispered about her at block parties, called her HOA Karen when she wasn't around. Not because they wanted to be cruel, but because the shoe fit. She was entitled, overbearing, and always just a little too close to everyone's business. At first I figured she was just a bored retiree trying to stay busy. I kept my head down, paid my dues on time, made sure my lawn was edged better than a golf course. I didn't want trouble. I'd dealt with enough politics in the corporate world to know the value of keeping peace. But peace doesn't last when someone's determined to test your limits. It started with a letter in my mailbox, a formal notice that my trash bins had been on the curb, 8 hours longer than permitted. I thought it was a joke. Then came a complaint about my shutters. Apparently, the desert sun had faded them too much, and they were lowering the neighborhood's aesthetic. She even knocked on my door once to let me know my car had been parked an inch over the driveway line, like I was running some kind of vehicular crime ring. Still, I kept my cool, told myself not to take it personally. That changed the weekend I went to visit my folks in California. I'd been planning the trip for months, hadn't seen them in a year. Locked up the house, closed the garage, set the alarm, and drove out with that rare feeling of freedom. But when I came back 2 days later, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. I pulled into my driveway, clicked the remote, and the garage door wouldn't open. That was strange. I tried the keypad. Nothing. I went in through the front door, opened the inside door to the garage, and stopped cold. Sitting right there, bold as day, was a silver SUV that wasn't mine. I didn't recognize it. I walked around it like I was in a dream. That's when I saw the HOA parking decal on the windshield and a little pink sticky note on the wall. Thanks for the space. Emergency HOA use. Marlene. My hands were shaking. I can't describe the feeling, except it was something between violation and rage. Like someone had stepped into my sanctuary and decided they could squat there without consequence. I went straight to her house and knocked. She answered with that smug little half-smile and said, "Oh, I was hoping to catch you. My daughter had an emergency flight and needed somewhere safe to leave her car. Your place was perfect since you were out of town." I stared at her, stunned. "You didn't ask," I said. "You didn't even tell me." She waved it off, like I was being dramatic. "It's just a garage, you weren't using it." That sentence hit me like a punch. Just a garage? It wasn't just a garage. It was mine, a piece of everything I'd worked for. A symbol of safety, privacy, dignity, and she just took it. I told her the car needed to be gone immediately. She smiled again and said, "It'll be gone by tomorrow. No harm done." But tomorrow came, and the day after, and that SUV didn't move. I left notes. I called. Nothing. Then I got an email from her citing some HOA clause about temporary emergency use of member property for community needs. I knew she was bluffing, but the audacity, the sheer disrespect, was overwhelming. I'd kept my mouth shut long enough, so I came up with a plan. If she wanted to treat my garage like her personal valet lot, then I was going to show her what boundaries really meant. I changed the garage code, locked the interior door, and booked myself a 10-day solo vacation up in the mountains. No cell service. No distractions. I left her a sticky note of my own on the keypad. Garage unavailable. Taking an emergency vacation. I didn't hear a peep while I was gone. But when I came back into reception, my phone nearly exploded. Voicemails from Marlene, panicked texts from her daughter, even emails from the HOA board. Apparently, she'd tried to get the car out, couldn't, called a locksmith who refused to open anything without a title, and was now demanding I unlock her daughter's property. I forwarded the messages to my lawyer and didn't respond. A few days later, the HOA board sent me a formal apology. They said Marlene had acted outside of her authority and that disciplinary action would be taken. But here's the kicker. When I checked my security camera footage, I found something that made my blood run cold. The day she moved the car into my garage, she used a master HOA access key to open my garage from the inside. Something only the HOA president should have had, and something they were never supposed to use on personal property without emergency approval. That, my friends, is where this story really begins. If you're shaking your head right now, believe me, I was too. But what I did next, that's the part you're going to want to see. So if you believe in standing up for your rights, in protecting your dignity and exposing the truth no matter how powerful the person trying to silence you is, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell to all so you don't miss what's coming next. Because this story, it's far from over. What I found in the HOA's documents after this shook me to my core, and it might just change everything. At first it was little things, those petty nuisances you think will blow over, the kind you grumble about under your breath but never take seriously. I'd get these HOA notices with Marlene's stiff signature stamped at the bottom like a warning label. The first one scolded me for leaving my trash cans out for too long, though I swear they'd only been there an extra hour past pickup. Then came another about the paint on my shutters. They were slightly faded, apparently impacting the neighborhood aesthetic, which translated from HOA speak just meant Marlene had too much time on her hands. I didn't give it much thought at the time. I figured, hey, she's the HOA president. Maybe she's just keeping things orderly. But there was something about the tone of those letters. Cold, condescending, like she wasn't talking to a neighbor, but to an employee who needed to be put in line. I shrugged it off, until the weekend I decided to visit my folks out in California. I'd been meaning to go for months. Packed a small bag, locked the doors, shut the garage tight, and pulled away early Friday morning, feeling that rare sense of calm you only get when you're about to spend a weekend in the warm, familiar embrace of home. My parents were thrilled to see me, and for 2 short days I let go of the daily grind. But when I returned Sunday night, exhausted from the drive and dreaming of my own bed, something didn't feel right. I hit the garage opener, but nothing happened. Thought maybe the batteries had died. Tried the keypad. Still nothing. Confused and tired, I went through the front door and walked into the house, then turned the handle on the door that led to the garage, and froze. It took me a moment to even register what I was seeing. A silver SUV, perfectly parked inside my garage, like it belonged there. But it didn't. I didn't recognize the vehicle. Didn't recognize the license plate. For a second, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe someone had broken in. I slowly walked around the car, heart pounding in my chest, looking for clues. That's when I spotted it. An HOA decal in the corner of the windshield. And worse, a small pink post-it note stuck to the garage wall near my toolbox. In loopy handwriting it read, "Thanks for the space. Emergency HOA use. Marlene." My stomach twisted. I wasn't just confused. I was violated. This wasn't just someone taking liberties. This was someone invading the one private place I had in the world, the place I kept safe for myself after 20 years of grueling work to finally afford a home of my own. And she didn't even bother to ask. She left a post-it like she was borrowing a cup of sugar. The fury built in my chest as I stared at that SUV, the sheer audacity of it all burning a hole in me. First thing the next morning, I marched straight to her door and knocked. Marlene opened it like nothing was wrong, wearing a smug little smile. Like we were about to have a neighborly chat over coffee. I didn't waste time. "There's a car in my garage," I said, my voice tight. She nodded calmly. "Yes, my daughter's. She had a family emergency, had to fly out suddenly. We didn't want to leave the car in public parking. Your house was the most logical choice." I stared at her, stunned. "You didn't ask." Her eyebrows lifted, like she was surprised I'd even bring it up. "You were out of town. It wasn't going to be in the way. It's just a garage after all." Those words, "just a garage," hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a garage. It was mine. It was part of the dream I'd worked 2 decades to achieve. It was where I kept my tools, my bike, old family photo boxes, things that mattered. It was sacred in a quiet, unspoken way that every man who's ever earned something on his own can understand. And she treated it like a communal storage unit. I told her the car needed to be gone that day. She offered a nonchalant shrug. "It'll be out tomorrow or the day after. I'll make sure of it." But she didn't. Days passed. I waited, checking the garage every morning like some sick routine, and every morning that SUV sat there like a monument to her arrogance. I texted her. No reply. I left voicemails. Nothing. Then came the email from the HOA board, a formal message citing some vague clause in the HOA charter that allowed for temporary emergency access to member property in service of community needs. It was laughable, infuriating. A lie hidden behind legalese. I'd had enough. That night I sat in my living room staring at the ceiling, realizing this wasn't just about the car. It was about respect, dignity, and the lines that people like. Marlene think they can cross when no one pushes back, so I decided I was going to push back. Hard. I changed the code on the garage keypad, locked the interior door tight, and then I booked myself a 10-day mountain retreat with no cell service, no email, and no more HOA drama. Just quiet. Before I left, I taped a note to the outside keypad. "Garage unavailable. Taking a long overdue emergency vacation." I drove away and didn't look back. 10 days later, when I returned, the SUV was still inside. But something else had changed. I checked my phone and the messages were endless. Calls from Marlene, texts from unknown numbers, even an email from her daughter claiming I'd held her car hostage. There was even mention of calling the police. But the best part? A frantic voicemail from Marlene herself, practically begging me to call her back because the locksmith she hired refused to open the garage without proof of ownership or a court order. Now she wanted to resolve this amicably. I smiled. For once, she didn't have control. I took a breath, made myself a cup of coffee, and decided I'd get back to her when I felt like it. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and firm, and sometimes it tastes like hot coffee on a cool morning in your own home that no one else gets to touch. And if you've ever had someone cross that line, disrespect your space, your dignity, your hard-earned peace, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. So if this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to fight for something you shouldn't have had to defend in the first place, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to all so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, it's only just beginning. What Marlene didn't know is that while I was gone, a friend of mine, who also happens to be a licensed contractor, stopped by and checked the garage's wiring. What he found, hidden behind the wall, that's going to change everything. She stood there on my porch like she had just dropped off a housewarming gift, not trespassed into my garage and dumped a strange vehicle there without my permission. I asked her again, calmly but firmly, to remove the SUV. She smiled, that smug, Little twist of her mouth I was starting to associate with pure condescension, and said it would be gone, tomorrow at the latest. But when the sun rose the next morning, the silver SUV was still sitting exactly where I left it, dead center in my garage, looking like a metal middle finger to everything I'd worked for. I waited until nightfall, hoping maybe she'd have it towed away in the cover of darkness, but no. And then came the real slap in the face. 2 more days passed and the car hadn't moved an inch. I left another note on her door, more blunt this time. No response. I called her twice, straight to voicemail, and that's when she took it to a new level. I got a text. Not an apology, not even a half-hearted excuse. Just, hope you're enjoying your garage-free week. That emoji? That pushed me past the edge. It wasn't just disrespect now, it was mockery. She thought it was funny, that she could take over my space, gaslight me with HOA nonsense, and get away with it because she wore the crown of neighborhood authority. But I didn't blow up. I didn't yell or storm over there demanding answers. I've lived long enough to know that real power comes when you keep your cool and let the other person dig their own grave. So I decided to play the long game. I work remotely, and I'd been hoarding vacation days for the last year. I figured now was the perfect time to use them. That night, I changed the keypad code on the garage, completely locked it down. Then, I reinforced the interior door that led from the house to the garage with a solid bolt lock. No access, no excuses. And then, I booked myself a 10-day stay at a mountain cabin I used to visit when I was younger. A remote little place up in Flagstaff, nestled among tall pines and quiet trails with no cell reception, no Wi-Fi, and no HOA presidents. Before I left, I scribbled a note on bright yellow cardstock, stuck it right on the keypad outside the garage, and wrote, "Garage unavailable until further notice. Emergency vacation." And then I left. The first few days in the mountains were bliss. Crisp air, the scent of pine in the breeze, and the simple pleasure of silence. No phone buzzing, no HOA letters, just peace. I hiked, cooked over a fire, read old novels by lantern light. It was the most myself I'd felt in years. But around day 6, I drove into the nearest town to grab some supplies and check my messages. That's when the flood hit. 23 missed calls, 14 texts, 3 voicemails, all from Marlene. At first, they were polite. "Can you please call me back? We need to talk about the vehicle situation." Then came the desperation. "We need that car out ASAP. You're being unreasonable." And finally, threats. "I've contacted the HOA board and legal counsel. You may be liable for any damage to the vehicle." My favorite, though? A message from an unknown number that read, "This is Marlene's daughter. I'm calling the police. You're holding my property hostage." That one made me laugh out loud. I wasn't holding anything. They had put their property in my space without consent. I was simply reclaiming what was mine. Still, I was careful. I drove back up to the cabin, unplugged again, and made notes. Dates, times, voicemails, all documented. If this went legal, I wanted my side airtight. And it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about dignity. About showing someone like Marlene that you can't just trample over a neighbor and smile like you did them a favor. If you're watching this and you've ever been in a situation where someone disrespected your space, your time, or your peace of mind, if someone has ever made you feel like your hard work didn't matter, hit that like button, subscribe to the C channel, and click that bell notification to all so you don't miss what comes next, because this story is just heating up. When I got home on day 11, it was like stepping into a battlefield. The SUV was still there, but something was off. I noticed a few scuff marks on the garage floor near the wheels, like someone had tried to move it. I checked my security. Camera footage from inside the garage. Turns out Marlene had come by twice. First time she knocked. Second time, she brought a man with her. Looked like a locksmith. He inspected the door, shrugged, and walked away. I played the video again and again, watching her body language change from confidence to confusion to outright panic. She wasn't used to being told no, and now her little power trip had backfired. But here's where it gets crazy. That night I heard a soft tapping on my front door around midnight. I peeked through the peephole, and there she was. Marlene. Alone. Hair disheveled, wearing a robe and slippers like she'd just stumbled out of bed. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. Just watched her as she stood there, breathing heavily, then slowly walked away. The next morning, I received an official-looking envelope slipped under my door, an HOA notice requesting emergency mediation to resolve an ongoing property access dispute. But I wasn't the one who started the dispute. I was the one who got dragged into it. I'm not sure what her next move will be, but what she doesn't know is that while I was away, my buddy Ray, who works in electrical, did a full inspection of my garage wiring. He found something odd. A tapped wire, connected to a small hidden device that doesn't belong to anything I installed, and we have reason to believe it's been transmitting. So now the question is, what else has Marlene been doing in that garage? And just how deep does this invasion go? If you thought parking her SUV in my space was the worst of it, think again. Because what we uncovered next may involve more than just HOA abuse. It might be the beginning of something far bigger. Stay tuned. The second I crossed back into cell service on my way down from the mountains, it felt like stepping into a digital hurricane. My phone lit up like Vegas on New Year's Eve, buzzing, vibrating, ringing off the hook with missed calls, voicemails, texts, and even emails. At first I thought something might have happened back home, maybe a neighbor emergency or family issue. But no, every single message was from Marlene, her daughter, and, more surprisingly, the other members of the HOA board. They weren't calling out of concern, though. They were calling because chaos had erupted the moment I left for my 10-day mountain escape. Turns out, Marlene had strolled up to my garage the day after I left, all confident and entitled, ready to retrieve her daughter's SUV like she was picking up dry cleaning. But when the keypad didn't respond and the door wouldn't budge, she flipped. According to the HOA vice president, who called me 3 times, Marlene stood outside my garage in broad daylight for over an hour, pacing, fuming, and even yelling into her phone. She called a locksmith who came out, took one look at the situation, saw the private property sign on my garage, checked the address, and said, "Nope, not touching that. You don't have the right." Apparently Marlene didn't take that well. She tried to get him to open the door anyway, even offered him cash on the spot. But he walked away and left her standing there like a kid locked out of the house after curfew. What's more, Marlene tried to file a formal complaint against me with the HOA, claiming I had abused access and compromised a community emergency plan. But her tantrum hit a legal wall fast. The HOA's own legal counsel reviewed everything and sent her a sharp email, one I got forwarded, stating in no uncertain terms that she had no legal authority to use my private garage for any reason, emergency or otherwise. In fact, what she did could be considered trespassing. The only reason I wasn't filing a police report was because I still held out a sliver of grace, because I believed in dignity, even for those who don't always show it back. When I finally pulled back into my driveway, there it was, that silver SUV, still squatting in my garage like an unwanted house guest. Dustier now, battery dead, tires sagging just a little from sitting too long. I opened the garage slowly, let the sunlight pour in like a spotlight on the truth, and walked around the vehicle like I was inspecting a crime scene. It didn't make me angry anymore. It just made me tired. Tired of people who think power gives them permission. Tired of being treated like your space, your home, your hard work doesn't mean anything if someone else decides they want it. I sent Marlene a short, polite message. "Garage open. New code is redacted. Hope your emergency's over." A few minutes later, her daughter arrived with a tow truck. Marlene stayed away. She didn't even show her face. The SUV was gone within the hour. No apology, no explanation, just silence. And you'd think that would be the end of it, that I could close the book, walk away with a quiet victory, and return to normal life. But just when I thought the worst was over, something else happened. As I was sweeping out the garage later that afternoon, I noticed something strange wedged behind a stack of paint cans in the far corner, a small black object. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. It was a wireless tracking device, not one I installed, Not anything I'd ever seen before. And it was still active. I froze. My mind raced. Who put it there? Why? How long had it been transmitting? I brought it inside, opened my laptop, and ran a scan using some software I kept from my IT days. The tracker had a weak signal, but its ID pinged to a civilian monitoring app. Not something that should be anywhere near a private residence, and it had been live the entire time I was away. Now the SUV parking incident felt like the tip of a much darker iceberg. What else had been happening in my garage? What were they really doing there? And why would anyone go to the trouble of placing a tracker on my property? That's when I remembered what my buddy Ray had said before about the strange wire he found in the ceiling during the electrical inspection. At the time, I thought it was just sloppy workmanship from a previous owner. But now I wasn't so sure. Something deeper was going on, and Marlene had been far too invested in that garage for far too long. This wasn't just HOA power tripping anymore. This felt like a setup, like I'd walked into a game I didn't know I was playing. If you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to take your dignity, your property, or your peace of mind, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell to all so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what started as a neighborhood feud might just unravel into something far more sinister. And as I stared down at that blinking tracker in my palm, one question burned hotter than all the rest. What if this wasn't about a car, but about me? And what if I wasn't the only one she'd done this to? What I discovered next made my stomach turn and changed everything. Stay tuned. 1 week after the tow truck hauled Marlene's silver SUV out of my garage like a broken promise finally being removed, I found something unexpected in my mailbox. A thick envelope stamped with the HOA logo, not from Marlene, but from the board itself. Inside was a formal letter of apology, signed by 4 out of the 6 remaining members, all stating they had no idea Marlene had been abusing her position to that degree. They acknowledged that what she'd done was not only an overreach, but a violation of trust, privacy, and basic decency. They wrote that it had sparked a long overdue internal review, where it came to light that this wasn't the first time Marlene had helped herself to emergency use of other people's property. One board member admitted she'd once borrowed patio furniture from a neighbor's backyard without asking, called it reallocating community assets. Another said Marlene had been rerouting maintenance requests to a company run by her cousin. That SUV incident wasn't just a one-off. It was the tip of an entitlement iceberg, and the board finally decided enough was enough. Quietly but firmly, they asked her to resign. No public scene, no scandal, just a final quiet fall from the power she'd held for way too long. They voted in a new HOA president, a retired Air Force vet named Bill, who looked you in the eye, asked before doing anything, and whose idea of community actually involved talking with people, not at them. And for the first time since I'd moved into that neighborhood, things started to feel peaceful. Real peaceful. No more passive-aggressive notes taped to my door. No more ridiculous citations for non-standard mailbox flags or excessive wine chimes. Just neighbors acting like neighbors. A few even came by to shake my hand. One older guy from down the street, Vietnam vet with a Harley, slapped my shoulder and said, "Heard what you did. That was brilliant. Should have charged her rent." Another neighbor, younger dad with 2 kids, joked, "You could have made a fortune on Airbnb. Garage with a view." But the best part wasn't the praise, it was the clarity. Because looking back, locking that garage wasn't about revenge. It was about drawing a line, about saying, "This is mine, this space, this home, this dignity." You don't get to walk into someone's world, plant your flag, and act like it's yours just because you've got a title or a clipboard or a printed badge that says HOA president. Power without respect is just bullying. And silence in the face of that kind of bullying? That's permission. That's how people like Marlene get away with it for years. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just shut the door. Locked it tight and went on vacation, a move that said everything without needing to say a word. And honestly, I think that silence is what really got to her. That SUV sat there, helpless and caged, for 10 whole days while she fumed outside it. There's something poetic about that. like watching her entitlement slowly run out of gas. But you know what really stays with me? It's what I found just after she left, the small blinking tracking device that had been planted behind my paint cans. I still don't know how long it had been there. I don't know who planted it. And while it could have been Marlene, or her daughter, it's what that device revealed that still makes the hairs on my arms stand up. When I dug deeper using some of my old IT tools, I found that the signal had been pinging to an out-of-state relay server. Not local, not HOA, something bigger, something professional. And that's when everything I thought I knew about this situation cracked wide open. What if this whole garage stunt wasn't just about temporary parking? What if it was about access, surveillance, gathering data? And what if I wasn't even the first person they'd done this to? I remembered Bill, the new HOA president, saying Marlene always kept unusually detailed records on every homeowner, pictures, timelines, even voice memos. That's not oversight. That's obsession. And it makes me wonder, what else did she leave behind? Because just last night I found a loose ceiling panel above the garage light fixture. And behind it, let's just say there's something up there I haven't opened yet. I want to film it. I want to show you all. Because this story isn't over, not by a long shot. If you've ever had someone walk all over your rights, if you've ever felt that gut punch of being disrespected in your own space, I want you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that bell notification to all, because what I'm about to uncover might just explain why Marlene acted like she owned my garage and what she was trying so hard to hide. The truth has a way of leaking out, one panel, one wire, one blinking light at a time. And next time, I'll show you what I found in the ceiling. Because after all the games, all the notes, all the silence, I think it's finally time to see just how deep this rabbit hole really goes. Stay tuned. So, yeah. Sometimes justice doesn't come from yelling or fighting. It comes from knowing when to close the door, stand your ground, and wait. But something tells me this isn't over. That blinking device I found, that loose ceiling panel, it's raised more questions than answers. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when people with power start hiding things, there's usually a reason. So if you want to see what I discover next, do me a favor, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and let me know what you would have done in my shoes. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification to all so you don't miss what I find in that ceiling. Because the next chapter? It's about to take this story to a whole new level. I'll see you there.